back to TSD Television. I'm Bernal Smith, President and CEO of Best Media and the new Tri-State Defender. And thank you for tuning in to TSD Television. We have with us the Executive Director of the Memphis chapter of the NAACP, Ms. Madeline Taylor. She's back for another segment here on TSD Television. Again, thank you for being here with us. And, you know, previously we talked a little bit about the work of the NAACP, its current relevancy, some of the proactive things that it's doing in Memphis and around the country. And certainly one of the areas that the NAACP works on is voter advocacy, and to make sure that we have fair, equitable elections here. You know, we've had quite a bit of challenges to some of the elections that have taken place recently. Can you talk a little bit about some of the behind-the-scenes work that the organization has done relative to some of the issues we've had at the local election commission, and to make sure that voters are registered and can fairly exercise their right to vote?
Well, of course, thank you for allowing us to come.
Yeah.
But voter empowerment is one of our primary objectives. And that we think about voter empowerment as far as voter registration, voter participation, voter education, and then just voter monitoring the election to ensure that we have a fair election and that candidates as well as the people have an opportunity to vote on candidates and candidates have an opportunity to participate. In Memphis, we have been actively involved in working with the election commission and challenging them to do their job. And they've been in, the current election commission has been in office now for 8 years. And we've had to work very diligently with them to ensure that they gave us fair elections, because we were having real challenges during elections, counting the ballots, checking machines, and just making changes that were unwarranted in the election process. We work very closely with them on those things. We work to try to educate the community. And of course, we can't go out and teach you, but we can offer the opportunity to learn more about what's going on in the election, and if you will put something into it.
Be receptive to them.
And exactly. And we've had a candidates forum prior to every election in order to bring the candidates before us so that you can see what they have to say and make your own decisions. We don't put out ballots, but we try to get you to take advantage of this opportunity and see what's going on and make your own decision. We work to say, go to the polls, go to the polls. We work to get young people registered, because every year we get a new crew of young people that turn 18. And we're there to try to be sure that they're registered to vote. We go into the high schools to try to capture them beginning in April of each year. We work through the churches to tell them help them to share with the people where the the voting booths.
Right, or the polls.
The polls are early voting. We promote early voting as your opportunity to do it when you feel like voting. These are all of the things that we get directly involved in. We have most recently put in election monitoring because we had problems with the polls. We've been putting poll watchers out there on we can't cover 200 and some odd polls, but the key ones, or ones where there seem to be problems, to ensure that the officers and the judges and the election people are doing their jobs correctly. Maybe we don't get to say this often enough, but thank you for giving me a chance.
Absolutely, and
people don't know what we're trying to do or why.
Well, that's important. That's why we invited you here. You know, thinking about that, you know, recent election there was 4 amendments on the ballot, very important constitutional amendments here in the state, And we took a few questions from some of our readership and some of the folks on our social media. And one of the things they asked about was on Amendment 2. The NAACP in particular took a stance to say yes to that amendment. And essentially the amendment was about how judges at the appellate and Supreme Court level are selected. And I'm not ashamed to say TSD, along with the local Ben Jones chapter of the attorneys, the lawyers here, both said no, that we should vote no to that, and because we felt like it was taking the power out of voters' hands and putting it into the legislative hands. Can you talk a little bit about your decision-making process about taking that stance on that particular amendment and what that, how that kind of came about?
Well, yes and no, because I personally was not involved in that decision making.
Okay.
That came down as a decision from our state organization.
Okay.
And of course, when we learned about it, the decision had already been made,
Right.
and the commitment had already been made
Okay.
to the powers that were promoting it,
Right.
that the NAACP would support yes on to.
Okay.
With that, as an organization, then we were committed
I got you.
to support yes on to.
Okay.
I think you saw me in commercials.
Right.
And in fact, I was there as a substitute, really, for our state president, because she was unable to film it at the time
Sure.
that it needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
This was a commercial that ran across the state.
Absolutely. And I believe it was impactful, and I think that's what caused some people to question it. We got questions about it because they did take the influence of people like yourself and use it not necessarily to educate voters, but to sway and convey a message to voters to support a stance without really providing the real detail about it. And it was a powerful piece. You had Governor Bredesen and you had Governor Haslam both in it. It was certainly a powerful piece, but I think there was still a lot of misinformation about not only that amendment but all of them. But now that those amendments have passed, then how do we advocate for issues like women's issues in particular? And we're going to sort of wrap this segment up. But obviously, Amendment 1 passed. How can women in the community and other individuals sort of seek advocacy through the NAACP, both locally and across the state, relative to those kinds of issues?
Well, I will address that, but let me go back one step, because we did in our branch meeting have a full and open discussion about
Very good.
Amendment 2, because there were a number of questions that came from the community on behalf of this. And I think the conversation revolved around the fact that it was not a perfect amendment. It was not a perfect agreement. But it represented an alternative that would be good for our community, in the sense that if the elections were open across the state for appellate and Supreme Court judges, and African Americans were forced to run across the state, we would be severely challenged. 17% of the state of Tennessee is African American. That 17% lives in West Tennessee,
Right.
primarily in Shelby County.
Absolutely.
So that limits our scope and ability to raise funds and
To campaign across statewide.
campaign across the state. And we've had two very good examples of that.
Certainly Harold Ford Jr. running Senate across the state.
That's right. And George Brown.
Yeah.
In trying to weigh those two, we ended up on the side of yes on 2.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. It's a valid point. We're going to keep this segment rolling a little bit because you did bring up a very good point. We have had that challenge. I think it continues to be one. I think conversely, when you look at the issue, we are, then that puts us in a position where do we have a governor that we can appeal to make fair and equitable appointments when it comes to those appellate judge positions and Supreme Court positions? And then do we have the sway and ability with the legislative body to take the governor's appointments and approve them? Because essentially we've moved now to a federal model for appointing judges, sort of like how the President of the United States appoints Supreme Court judges, then they have to be approved by Congress. I think that's going to be the ultimate.
And those are valid considerations.
Yeah.
In the current environment, it really is a concern.
Yes.
From the African American perspective and for the women's perspective, those are things that we have to challenge and trust. Because right now there are only 4 African Americans on this 29-person court.
Right.
There are only 4 women on this 29-person court. So we're not holding any kind of majority whatsoever.
Oh, no doubt about it.
We're there through the virtue of these 2 governors. Well, it's been more than, because Judge Dinkins has been there for quite a while.
Right.
And prior to that, we had Judge McLean,
right,
who was there for a couple of governors back. It's trust.
Yeah, and I think that's given the makeup of the legislative body now, the Republicans have a supermajority in Congress, and of course they have, in the state legislature, and they also have the governor's seat, and frankly, for the most part, locally, statewide, and across the country, African Americans have the majority of our eggs in the Democratic basket, and so can we get fair representation? I think that's a question. It's way beyond the scope of this show to be able to answer. But I appreciate your response to that question, and you bring up a valid point. It's sort of, do we continue to try to fight these battles across the state to campaign and be able to compete, or do we put it in the hands of essentially the governor and the legislative body, and ultimately does the pendulum swing back towards the Democratic side, and which would give us more of an opportunity. And I believe that eventually it will be. What's your thoughts about
Well,
that?
one other thing that concerned them as far as popular elections across the state, that opens up those positions to anyone who chose to run, whether they're qualified to serve as a state jurist or Supreme Court jurist or not. It allowed for what is now available, corporate dollars, to determine what happens on our state Supreme Court. And these are the courts that our people go to for death penalty cases. So we have a vested interest in what happens on those courts. And it's important that we have people that look like us and are familiar with our experience.
Right.
Not to vote for us, but just to understand us, right, and our experience.
Sure.
On this one, I don't know that we had a totally right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we ended up.
Sounds like it was a lesser of two evil type of decision, and I think depending on which side of the coin you were on, certainly for us, we looked at it and said, we always want to make sure that we keep the power in the hands of the people, and that's really what our decision came down to. Is that we'd rather the voters have a chance to weigh in and have a voice, rather than giving that voice to fewer people, which is the state legislature and the governor. But certainly you can argue the other way and say maybe we will have a better chance rather than trying to depend on voters in East Tennessee and Middle Tennessee to support the interest of those of us in West Tennessee, which very seldom happens. Yeah, doesn't happen. Well, listen, we are going to have you back on the show. There's so much more that we're going to talk about. I hope to really have you as a regular guest. We can sit down and talk about things that are going on in our community, talk about the work that you guys are doing, which is, I am so happy to shed some light for our viewership and our readership about the work of the NAACP. I want to also give you an opportunity quickly to talk about any events or fundraisers or anything you guys got coming up, because we know it takes money to do this work. It takes money to do this work. So, talk briefly about it.
Well, of course, right now we're in the midst of our fall membership campaign, and people must understand that we are not funded by any government organization or any charitable organization, but by the people of this community. And we're able to have an office because of the people here in this community. There are branches across this country, over 2,000 NAACP branches, but they don't all have offices because they have to develop the support from their communities in order to be able to pay a staff and pay rent and overhead in order to do that. We've been able to do this for a number of years because of the wonderful support that we've gotten from the Memphis community. The Memphis branch is the largest membership branch in the entire network of NAACP branches and has been for many years. We appeal to the community now for adult memberships, which are only $30 for 1 year. And you may submit a membership and never have to use our service, but you make it so that those who do need it and can't afford it have access. And that's really what we're trying to do. Our theme this year is All In for Justice and Equality.
All In for Justice and Equality. We've heard it. Well, listen, I want to encourage you, our viewers, to support this membership drive, get a membership, support this organization. They're doing some very worthwhile work here in the greater Memphis area. And although they might not directly impact something going on with your life, as Dr. King once said, the existence of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we've got to support justice everywhere, and we can do that through the NAACP. Ms. Taylor, thank you for being here, and I look forward to having you back. Continue to do great work, and we're going to continue to forge a positive relationship between our organizations that moves this community forward. We've got to do that.
Thank you for the opportunity, Bernal, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you.
I got your membership envelope.
And you're going to have my check. You're going to have my check. So thank you. We're going to wrap up. Signing off from TSD Television. Thank you for your viewership, information, inspiration, elevation. Continue to tune in.